Unbroken, the podcast with Madeleine Black. Healing through storytelling.
Hello and welcome to Unbroken, the podcast with me, Madeleine Black, where I am talking to people that have overcome adversity and they haven't just bounced back, they have bounced forward. And today my guest certainly matches that description. So my guest today is Ian Young. Ian uses his own experiences to see how he can genuinely benefit others. He has been working in the private sector of the addiction treatment industry since 2003, successfully touching the lives of thousands of people and their families, showing them a new way to live and encouraging them to rebuild their lives. He was the founder of 2 large rehabilitation facilities in the UK in 2004 and 2006, and is currently the co-founder and treatment director of The Park, the Phuket Addiction Recovery Clinic, which he has been developing and growing since 2019. Ian is about to start a new project on the island of Koh Phangan, where he's collaborating to create a sober health and wellness co-working retreat next to the beach called Eden. In 2008, he founded Sober Services Global, which helps people attain and maintain recovery from their behavioral health challenges by offering bespoke packages of treatments to individuals and their families also affected by the patient. He has published his autobiography, It's Not About Me, Confessions of a Recovered Outlaw and Addict, From Living Hell to Living Big, in 2013, which he now gives away as a free download from his website. His personal mission is to co-create a green and harmonious world through laughter and love, bringing a better quality of life to all who cross his path and beyond. So welcome, Ian. Lovely to have you with us live from Thailand. How are you doing?
Yeah, no, that bio sounds a bit long-winded now. I'm hearing it. I think some of it should be a bit shortened. But essentially, I've been working with individuals and their families who are struggling with addiction since, for 17 of my 19 years sober. I'm approaching my 20th year of sobriety now, which is just
fantastic.
Yeah.
The first question I would like to ask you, Ian, is what does the word unbroken mean to you?
Unbroken. It's not a word that I use, but I suggest that in my world, the word unbroken would be used to suggest a string or a length of days in a row of continuous sobriety, maybe. So I'm somewhere in a region of around coming up to 8,000 days unbroken sobriety. 8,000 unbroken days in a row.
You count the individual days. That's a lot of days.
Well, I remember when I passed 7,777. So I trigger numbers of unbroken days, but that would be the use that comes to mind of the word unbroken. It's not something I use. I remember there was a movie called Unbroken, but it's not language that I use particularly.
Oh, it's just to get you thinking. So I read your book, It's Not About Me, and I love the honest warning that you start with. Was it important to be so honest and direct about your journey?
Well, look, one of the principles of my sobriety, my recovery, has been adopting an attitude of honesty in all of my affairs. Now, but what that is saying is that I no longer commit crimes. I don't need to lie, cheat, steal, or manipulate or be a naughty bad boy anymore. I moved into an energy of being a good guy. And part of that territory comes with being honest in all of my affairs. But at the same time, there's also a boundary. You don't need to be honest in all, I don't need to get onto a bus and start telling the bus conductor my life story. There's a time and a place to be honest. And for a long time, historically, my story I hadn't really told my story. When I speak in the 12-step fellowship rooms, I don't go into my story too much. I talk about my recovery journey, but I don't necessarily talk about what I did to get there. Partly because I think my story was quite extreme, which you would have noticed in the book.
Yeah, it was extreme.
But people wouldn't necessarily identify with, well, I never did any of that. But at the same time, I did have a lot of people asking me for my story, particularly from the personal transformational world, people that wanted to learn more about me and see how that was relevant for them. And so it was a labour of love writing the book, and I figured I would tell. So there's a motorbike going by.
That's
I would
okay.
tell the story. I just let people know this is what I got up to. These are some of the crazy things. And again, there are. I really ought to have spent the time in COVID actually writing a second edition, but I was far too distracted with Netflix. But there are many other stories that I could have added to that whole thing. And today I'm not scared, to be honest. I got nothing to hide. Police don't seem to be tracking me or tracing me anymore. I think they've accepted that I have become a good guy and moved away from being a bad boy, and I'm not on their most wanted list anymore. Though for a time I was. There was a period, particularly in Europe, where I was being actively pursued. That they just didn't know where I was living.
So you stopped looking over your shoulder now.
Stop looking over my shoulder.
Yeah. So you state that you really were quite an extreme character, and you didn't really, now you talk about boundaries, but then you didn't really have boundaries. Do you have any regrets?
Regrets? My regrets are more about potentially how I treated people, particularly towards the end of my addiction. But because I lost my moral compass, I started behaving in ways that I'm not proud of. I started treating people poorly. People that would walk into my house or where I was staying were for me just people that I could blag money from, or I could take their attention. Some of my relationships, it was very selfish. My behavior I'm not proud of the way I behaved those last 2-3 years, and those aren't regrets of what happened, but I have regrets about how I might have upset or hurt people, particularly people rather than shops or things that I nicked from. But no, so certainly I have regrets about having treated people in such a way. However, for me to find that catalyst and that motivation to get sober and to change my life, I was motivated and driven by the very fact that I hated the person I had become. So I had to do those things in order to get to a place where I could no longer tolerate who I was, in order to make a decision to change.
Yeah, that was part of your journey, and that was very evident in your book, that you really didn't like who you became. In fact, you really had to hit rock bottom for you to really wake up to what you were doing.
Yeah, and the realization that actually the drugs had warped my mind by that point, that I had become that junkie archetype that I'd always dismissed. Because for many of my drug taking years, I was the party person. I was the life and soul. I was a good guy just getting high. But it was when I made that shift across from, say, psychedelics and ecstasy and hallucinogenics into the darker drugs like cocaine, heroin, and particularly when I was injecting, that I started. There was a shift in my chi, in my energy, and then when I got myself back to the UK after having escaped captivity in Europe, and now I had no means to support my habit, that's where I crossed all those moral boundaries, and I did them fully conscious that I was hurting people in order to get what I wanted or what I needed or what I desired, just to take away that feeling of
Yeah, it really was a vicious cycle, wasn't it? Because you'd feel really, really bad, so then you take drugs to make you feel better, and then you'd feel really, really bad, so then it just was like, I was just like, I couldn't believe that you had never died, because you were so near dying when you were at your parents, very near before they put you into a treatment center. How hard was it to admit to yourself that, look at the mess I'm in, look at the help I'm in?
My first overdose was in France, and that was a wake-up call. That was wow, this way that I'm consuming drugs is potentially going to kill me. One day I'll take a hit and I might not wake up. There are a lot of people that are buried who never knew they were about to die. As a result, thing with an overdose, you don't know you're about to overdose, you just go. The second one was in India when I was in Dharamsala. And again, that was a scary moment, but yet it didn't have the power to stop me from having another hit immediately. But it was the third overdose, which really was the night before I got sober finally. My sobriety date is the 16th of March 2001.
Yes, because after you had treatment, wasn't it?
This is after I've been through 15 weeks of treatment. well, I'm actually still in treatment. I'm in secondary care.
Okay, but they advised you in the sense of not to make a relationship with somebody on the program, which you did, and that was how that led to that moment, really, wasn't it?
In a roundabout way, yes. Yeah, I can blame the fact that I was in this relationship in treatment, but actually, I think the relationship that I was in treatment was actually kind of helping me manage it, deal with it, and swallow the fact that I was going through psychotherapy. If I'm more honest, it's more about I had a one more hit syndrome in my head. I needed to prove to myself whether or not I could really never use again. I needed to prove to myself whether or not that in my mind I still had this love affair with cocaine, and I still wanted to be able to use cocaine safely. So I went into treatment wanting to stop using heroin and alcohol maybe, but I didn't have a desire to stop using cocaine. And so this overdose, or this relapse that led to an overdose, was the persuading factor to me. It was really me breaking through my own denial. It was me going through that process of, am I really an addict? And the conclusion I came to was, yes, you cannot use safely.
So you decided for your well-being, your health, your sanity, the only way you will survive is to totally stop everything.
It persuaded me that abstinence and was the only way that this person would recover from my addictions. Yes. And treatment had been teaching me that, but it took me another effort at using it, which led to an overdose within hours, for me to accept that and to fully concede to my innermost self that a life worth living is going to be very different.
You talk about it really as surrendering, and it's surrendering to the facts. How hard was it, or was it a relief to finally surrender?
Oh, that's a good question. I don't remember being asked that before. I think the hardest part was probably accepting to myself that I had to surrender. And once I had made that decision, then it became much easier to follow through. But getting to that point of accepting the surrender was probably that. And what does the surrender mean to me? It meant giving up my DJing. It meant giving up my all the friends I'd known since the age of 16. It meant moving back out of London and into, I lived in my parents' house. Yeah, I moved to my parents' house Christmas Eve, while knowing that they were away, in order to do a detox. And when they came home January the 6th, I spoke to them and they confronted me and said, you're only going to stay here if you do it our way. And I hadn't lived there for 13 years. I'd just been AWOL. So I was broken enough to accept my father's ultimatum to go into treatment if I wanted them to help me.
It was a very kind of beautiful moment, even though it was like you were almost dead. It was a very beautiful moment to read that you finally accepted help from other people and you woke up to what you were doing, because you were very, very nearly dead at that stage.
I was very poorly. I was 8.5 stone. I couldn't walk up a flight of stairs.
I weigh more than that.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've lost a bit of weight recently, but I've gone up to 15 stone not so long ago, a few years ago. But yeah, so my father had been coached that when I came and asked for help, this is what he was to tell me. He was to tell me to go into treatment if I wanted their help. And he said, you go to treatment, you come out, and then we will house you until you get on your feet. If you don't go to treatment, then you need to leave until you're ready, which was perfect, you know. And that's, I'm an interventionist today. That's what I was talking about in my biography with Social Services. I work with families all over the world and I coach them similar boundaries. You know, you need to confront your loved one from a place of love, with complete honesty, but some significant boundaries that are kind of counterbalance all of the ways that you've been enabling them historically. So if my dad had said, yes, you can stay here, just don't use drugs, for me, I would have stayed there and tried to use drugs.
Because sometimes it's real tough love that you have to advise people, isn't it? If it's not working, then you need to put them out.
Tough love is exactly what I prescribe for families that ask for my help. That they need to treat their loved one from a place of tough love.
And really, when you were being treated, that you kind of discovered your life's purpose.
Well, I really enjoyed rehab. For me, it was a life learning experience for sure. Now, I've done a lot of self exploration through psychedelics, through chemistry, and my mind was open. I was an open-minded individual. I still am, but I learned significant self-truths during my time in residential rehab, and they molded me in such a way that even though I went out and used again, I knew I wanted to go back to that life. I knew that the potential opportunities that recovery could give me, they were more powerful by this point. And I was in a rehab, a really strict place. No music, no, it was before mobile phones, but no technology, no communication with the outside world, no newspapers, no sugar, no caffeine. If you wanted to have a cigarette, you had to stand by yourself in a designated circle. The closest person next to you had to be at least 20 meters away, so more severe than the social distancing you experience at the moment. Really serious stuff. Regime, you had to be up by 7:30, and you weren't allowed to go to bed until 9 p.m. the earliest. And it was a really strict space, but yet it was incredibly loving, and I found it really. I found a lot of freedom through the discipline that they were giving me, having come from
it sounds like you were very held and very supported, and it was there that you really you spoke about, you learned about paying it forward, and that is something that's really important to you now as well, isn't it? Can you explain a bit more about that?
Well, the greatest thing is the movie Pay It Forwards, which sadly is now largely going to be buried because it had Kevin Spacey in it. But actually, he's brilliant in this movie, as is Helen Hunt, and more remarkably, the young kid Haley Joel Osment. And it's about the kid at school being assigned a social studies exercise to find something that will make a difference to his local community. And so the kid designs it a way that when someone gives him a gift, he's going to then pay that gift forwards to 3 other people. And if everybody pays it forwards to 3 other people, then the world will become a better place. And that's exactly what I learned and what I was taught about recovery, in that what a gift it is to get abstinent and find a way to deal with life on life's terms, and to feel wonderful in your own skin as a result of the exercises that come up through the 12-step program, to then be assigned the mission to pay that forwards.
I love it as well. And you also talked about the people that you met in all the meetings that had the laser eyes. What do you mean by the laser eyes? You mean that they were just really alive and loving life, or?
I'll give you another example, like the Ready Brett glow. Do you remember the Ready Brett advert on TV? These kids had this energy field going on, and these people in the meetings had laser beams coming. What I mean by that is that they were alive. They had stuff that was drawing me in, and that's important, because when you're new in recovery, or when you're coming off, you're looking at the floor, you're biting your nails, your energy is down, you're scared, you don't know how to communicate with people, you don't know what to say. When people talk to you, you don't know how to respond. And the people with this energy coming out are the people that I was aspired towards. And they taught me how to be. I didn't know how to be sober, but these guys showed me how they were sober, and I saw that they were smiling, and I wanted what they had, so I moved towards those people. I gravitated towards the people that had smiles on their faces, rather than the people that were frowning and staring at the floor.
But it's very simple, isn't it? Surround yourself with positivity rather than the negativity to drag you down. You also talk about how using all the drugs and alcohol just suppressed your feelings. So what did it feel like when you started to feel again and to experience all the emotions?
They say the good news is that you get the emotions back. The bad news is you get your emotions back. A lot of they were just unusual emotions. They were unfamiliar. I could write them down and say what they were, but I could never have described them for you. And so I was having these new and original emotional experiences, but they were never so overwhelming that they scared me. They were just unfamiliar, and that in itself was
so which
scary.
ones did you have to get used to? Which ones were so unfamiliar?
I think the realization of my anxiety, and having to learn how to not be anxious, and that came with repetition. The anxiety that I felt amongst other people, where I'd walk into a room and feel that everyone was looking at me, or that people were ignoring me, or if I walked into a room and I knew there was someone that I'd had an argument with, how do I sit still with those emotions? And, you know, a lot of it, I could logically think about, well, you know, don't worry about the one person in a room of 100 that you've fallen out with, focus on the 99 that you are happy with. But at the same time, the emotions weren't numb anymore. I wasn't drinking. So before I would say, sod it, I'll just go and blast through this event. Now I had to hold myself high, be present. And that's the challenge. How do you be present when you're experiencing
So how
those
do you ground yourself with that?
I think it's just come with time and experience.
Well,
But
it's not an experience, it's your intention, I think, isn't it, for you to sit with it?
It starts with blind faith. They tell me that I'm going to be okay. I trust them. That's blind faith. Then over a period of time, you actually go through it and you realize that it is okay, and that no matter how big or hard or extreme those feelings are, nothing bad's really happening. And so that leads you into a point of evidence-based faith. You now have evidence-based faith that actually it's going to be okay. And from that, you just move into autopilot.
It takes your energy to be able to say, I'm not running from this, I have to sit with this. So that's the uncomfortable part, you know, to ground yourself with it.
Sure. But each experience is another notch and another time that you've overcome. So you have to have those experiences. Otherwise, you're just going to retreat into a shell and be one of those people looking at the floor. So I was hanging out with the people that were high on life, and they were giving me these experiences and these opportunities by association. So I was going through it surrounded by people that loved me or that cared enough about me to make sure I was okay. And
it's amazing, the care, because when you first went to the meetings, you didn't know about changing your clothes, about washing yourself, and they would occasionally say, you're a bit smelly and I think it's time you had a shower or changed your clothes. Simple everyday stuff, you know, that wasn't your agenda to worry about your clothes, because you were squatting and everything.
I was essentially a crusty, you know, for many years. I didn't care about personal hygiene. None of us did. And I had to learn what was appropriate behavior. I had to ask how often I should bathe, how frequently I should change my underwear. These sorts of questions, as a 29-year-old guy, I hadn't really considered before. And I was taught that by the fellowship guys, people in the fellowship. And I guess that's why the fellowship is so important to our recovery, though it's not recovery. The recovery is in the 12-step program that we work outside of the fellowship. But the fellowship holds us and keeps us in a space where we're safe and relevant, where we find the people that are going to help us through the 12-step program.
You know, that was very evident how, like I said before, how held you were by them, just even the practical advice and the emotional support. It was an incredible atmosphere there. It really was one of support.
And of course, it's all for free. And that fellowship is for free, which just pays into the whole paying it forwards attitude. These people that have served me and helped me recover, I now have an obligation to go and pay it forwards to other people rather than pay it back. They don't want me to go and thank them for their time and give them some time. They want me to go and help the next person.
And the 12 steps, I guess you could say, is a religious thing, but it's not a religion. It's about finding your own God, whatever God means to you. But I liked that your God...
Hold on, I wouldn't say it was religious at all. It's not religious. It was written by people who at the time were influenced by white Christian dogma. But they wrote the steps in such a way as to remove the references to Christianity.
But and finding your own God was what I was going to say, whatever that God means to you. And I liked that your God was a woman. Why is she a woman?
Well, God has to be a feminine energy. She's about love and procreation and creativity and generosity and kindness and spirit and all very feminine energies. And to people that are struggling with the fact that my God is a woman, then just consider my God to be your God's mother.
I didn't struggle with that at all. I like that.
Some people do.
Some people do like that.
But yeah, God as we understand God, and it can be whatever you want. And the reality is, I don't even know that God exists. What a load of nonsense. But I have found that when I'm praying to a God that I don't believe in, and when I'm listening to a God that I don't believe in, magic happens in my life. So I carry on talking to a God I don't even believe in.
Yeah.
And so then I've given her a form, and she looks just like Madeleine.
But then that's also about trust, isn't it? Trusting life.
trust, yeah, faith that it's all going to be okay no matter what, even when it's not okay. And if it's not okay, it's not over yet.
Yes. So tell me about sober services that you run, because I see that there's quite a few different type of services that you offer people. Some of them are quite, what do you call it? The bodyguard one. What does the bodyguard one mean?
Well, sober companion, sober bodyguard, and I'm connected to the guys that do like armed security for people who need recovery. So they're armed, doing, with celebrities or politicians. So they're kind of doing a dual role. But essentially, it's an intense one-on-one scenario where people either post rehab, they want more support, and that kind of merges into recovery coaching, or it's an alternative to treatment. So maybe an actor who doesn't have the luxury of time to get off set, so you're keeping them sober no matter what. It's a higher end service. It's labor intensive. It's potentially living with someone 24 hours a day for a year or more.
And keeping them sober no matter what means literally not allowing them to touch anything, and to really stop them by all means.
Absolutely. Yeah. And it requires a presence to be able to command that sort of relationship from someone. So sober companion is all about building rapport and then holding it. So grab them, connect with them, let them feel safe with you, and then let them allow you to protect them and keep them away from those triggers and stuff. So at the same time, I've been doing it since 2008. I've been doing sober companions. So it's about also being able to read what's going on and see where their head's going and when their mind is getting adrift, and being able to read the situation and keep them safe. So sober companion, I was the kind of pioneer of that as a business in the UK. There were a couple of people that had done it before. Famously, like Jimmy Page had a sober companion, and the guy who did that is someone I fondly refer to as the godfather of UK sober companions. But in sober services came along in 2008 and started doing that with a team rather than just myself. But the other thing that sober services was about is interventions, which I was talking a little bit about earlier, where a family will call me up and say, can you help me with little Johnny? We know he needs help, but he doesn't want help. And so I go in, and the family think I'm going to kind of work some magic with Johnny, but actually the magic happens by my coaching the family members to then prepare for a process where we're going to confront Johnny from a place of absolute love, complete honesty.
It's supporting them to support him, really, isn't it?
No, it's coaching them to confront him with love.
Okay.
So that he can have the result that we all want for him, which is against what he is expressing that he wants, i.e. we want you to get help, go into treatment. And this is
the tough love, really, isn't it? This is where it must be hard for families to hear what you're saying. And then, I don't know, do some families not able to carry that out?
The challenge that I've seen, and I got together with two other industry insiders about 5 years ago, we were talking about this, and calculated that between us, we have about a 95% success rate with an intervention. And what that means is if the family engages with us, 95% of the time, your loved one's going to get into rehab. They're going to choose to accept the help that we're giving them today. They're going to choose treatment 95% of the time. But between the three of us, and at the time, we were the three leading guys in Europe outside of North America, we also concluded that only about 1 in 3 families choose to have the courage to follow through on the intervention, even though we know it works 95% of the time. So 2 out of every 3 families are too scared to confront their loved one, mainly because their loved one, as an addict, has learned how to control the family and how to keep the family in fear. Yeah. And they are so scared of upsetting his or her feelings, they're walking around on eggshells. They don't know how he's going to react, and their fear of how he's going to react, which is based on how he's trained you to be scared of how he's going to react, with anger, blame, screaming, fighting, breaking, whatever it is stopping 2/3 of families from following through on a process that we know works 95% of the time. That's a really difficult thing for families to accept. But I believe that when they sit down and they listen and they understand the process, most of them can get behind it. But until then, it's quite a far thing, because we're taught that they're not going to accept help until they accept it themselves, not really understanding that the point of an intervention is to get the person with addiction to a point where they're so scared of what is about to happen if they don't accept the help that we give them, that they go into treatment. So in my own case, my father gave me the ultimatum: go into treatment, and of course when you come out, we'll give you shelter, we'll feed you until we'll take care of you until you get back on your feet. But if you don't choose to go into treatment, then you have to leave the house. That would be my consequence. Yeah. And you leave the house until you're ready to accept the treatment that we want to give you. So when I'm talking with family, I'm saying we're going to create a story. We're going to write it as a letter that expresses that how much you love them. I'm your father. I love you. You know that I've always cared about you. And, even though you were distant for 13 years, you know that I've always been here for you when you're ready to ask for help. Love, and then honesty, but your addiction is so dangerous to your health that I cannot tolerate having you in active addiction, living in my house with your sister and your mother. I cannot accept you in an unrecovered unless while you're still in active addiction. Therefore, you have to accept treatment and your chance to recover, or else, and this is the boundaries, or else you have to leave the house until you are ready to accept it on my terms.
And it is all about boundaries, really, isn't it? They have to be very tight and stick to it.
Yeah, they're bound, and we calculate what the boundaries are going to be specific to each family based on what I hear the family is doing to enable them. So every intervention is unique. It takes about 40 hours or so to prep it, depending on the size of the family, sometimes a bit more. But they are incredibly powerful experiences that take the family and allow it to heal and to come back together again. We get the loved one into treatment. The family then starts learning about what they can do to take care of the loved one when they come out in a healthy way. And in many ways, the whole family needs to recover from the chaos.
I'm hearing it's a journey for all of them. The ripple effects, it's not just the person that's the user, it's the ripple effects of what it does to people, isn't it, in relationships.
Well, the addict will tell you, it's none of your business. This is me. I can take care of myself. I'm not having any effect on you. My using has nothing to do with you. But that's not true. The reality is that the addict's using is affecting everybody. Everyone is petrified for you. That everyone's scared that you're about to overdose, that you're about to drink yourself stupid. You're going to come home, crash the car. You're going to drive with the kids. You're going to get pulled over by the police. All types of things could go wrong while you're inebriated or getting high. And yet you believe that it's nothing to do with anyone else. It's your own stuff. But that's not the case. The whole family is affected. That's why in the industry we refer to addiction as a family disease, because everybody is wrapped up in walking around you gently, trying not to upset the apple cart so that you somehow don't go into a mad, angry rant or rave and hurt people or do something crazy.
Can you ever have imagined when you were living the life that you lived that one day you would be doing what you're doing now? It's so like contrastingly different.
No, and I was talking about this earlier with some friends. My life before I got sober is so far removed from the life that I've done since I got sober. Yes, I could probably have imagined that I would end up living in somewhere like Thailand. Yeah, okay. Yes, I could probably have imagined that I was involved in doing things as a community or helping people in some way. Yes, but the specifics and the details. I mean, I was married for 11 years. I had no idea I was going to get married. I never had any ambitions to get married. I was the whole direction of my life just took a whole turn when I got sober. I stopped DJing. I stopped being the life and soul, or actually I was no longer the life and soul of party, but I stopped attending those parties, and I stepped away from the whole scene that I've been an integral part of building up since the early 90s, since 1990. I've been immersed in this counterculture rave scene, and yet in 2001 I had to step away completely. These days, I come back together with all of my old crew. Every year we meet at Glastonbury, essentially, where me and many of my old crew are now running one of the all-night fields. If you know Glastonbury Festival, it's called the Common. It's next to Shangri-La, and it starts at 10 p.m. and finishes at 6 a.m. when the rest of the main acts are all over. And I go there and I meet up with all my old crew and all my old family. They all know I'm sober. And of course, my role there is I have an Arctic trailer full of booze, and I distribute the booze between all of the bars. And then I go throughout the night and I take care of the bars, and I manage the bars, and I have a porter cabin with all kind of administrational stuff going on. And at the end of the week, I make sure that everything adds up and everyone gets paid. And of course, the reason why they gave me this job is because they knew I wouldn't drink the booze. Mm-hmm. They knew that I don't need to steal anything anymore. And they knew that I wouldn't be off my head and that I'd get the job done. And I've been, well, I mean, this year they had to cancel it, but I've been doing that since 2008 with the guys, and I love the fact that I get to go back and be amongst that old crowd, and I'm completely safe. I'm not going to get drunk. I'm not going to get high. I've been back to.
But it must be an amazing feeling for you to think that you can now be involved and have all that going on around you, and there's no temptation anymore. Your mindset is completely altered.
I've been in a safe mindset since I was about 18 months. The first 18 months were the danger time for me. For some people it's longer, for some people it's shorter. But for me, it was about 18 months when I realized that I had recovered, and that I intuitively knew I was never going to drink or use again unless I really chose to. And that this was the life that for me. And that's a long time. That was 2003, just before I started working in the industry. So it's 17 years ago where I knew that I was never going to, get high again. And it's been okay. I mean, today I haven't smoked for 15 years or something. I haven't smoked a cigarette. I don't. Most of the time, I'm caffeine. I'm not caffeine dependent. I don't wake up and need coffee. I do enjoy coffee, but I'm not caffeine dependent at all. I don't enjoy gambling particularly. There's a lot of behaviors that I've shifted away from. These days I get up and the beach is like 40 meters behind me. I go running for 6 kilometers along the beach. That's what I did, 6-point-something kilometers this morning, barefoot on the beach. Yeah, that's a new freedom and a new happiness. So getting into physical shape has been something I've been enjoying recently. But I will add
that's about landing back in your body, isn't it, and connecting and grounding yourself.
I will add that I've had a constant battle for all this time with my love affair with sugar. You got to think that when I was drinking booze, the booze that I was enjoying was like Bailey's, Malibu, Contro, Southern Comfort, real sweet things.
And sugar is a real addiction. It's really hard for people to kick sugar.
Yeah, and I will still engage in my love affair with chocolate regularly, or big packet of crisps regularly. Living out here. When I first moved to Thailand a few years ago, I would have a Magnum ice cream every day, no matter what. I mean, I don't maybe have 1 or 2 a month now, but at first it was every day. I've had to purchase chocolate in 100-gram size bars now, because historically I was buying big slabs of Galaxy or Dairy Milk or Toblerone, and I'd eat the whole 300 or 400 grams in a sitting. So now I have to portion size myself when I'm eating chocolate and limit myself to 100 grams at a time.
But you're aware now that is an addiction as well. It could be an addiction if you allowed it to get out of control. So just before we
it has been out of control for me. It has been out of control. Just
before we kind of come to the end of this, I can't believe how the time has whizzed by. Do you have any tips that you would give to anyone that's listening right now that helped you to stay as you are right now?
Look, I'm a big believer in whatever you give, you get back. They say if you're pointing a finger, there's 3 pointing at you. Tony Robbins says the secret to living is giving, paying it forwards. The more I'm of service to others, the more the universe seems to reward me. I wake up every day and I'm jolly. My default emotion is jolly. Some days I'm jollier than other days I'm not cool. But by and large, I wake up jolly. And I believe that has come as a result of me living a life that's based on how can I bring more value to other people. And not just in my business, but in all of my affairs. How can I make that person smile? How can I do more to help the next person have a better quality of life? And by giving to other people, you keep what you have by giving it away. And the more I give away, the more I seem to feel terrific about life. And I've had some people screw me over. I've had business people that have taken me for tens of thousands of pounds a number of times. But yet I still believe intrinsically in helping other people, even though I am at risk and vulnerable sometimes of being screwed over. And I guess that's just a consequence of being a nice guy. But this is all I ever wanted. I wanted to move away from being a bad boy and become a good guy. And that's what I wanted from recovery, to be a good guy. And a consequence of being a good guy is that sometimes there are shysters that will come and shit on me. But the benefits of being a good guy is that I just have a really cool quality of life, and God will protect me. Yeah, COVID came, and I was okay. My lockdown was okay. It was manageable. I was, very fortunate in I had money, I had company, and I had super fast internet. And we haven't been locked down since the beginning of June now in Thailand, but I can't become.
That's about your gratitude, though, as well, isn't it? Recognizing what you have rather than what you don't have.
Gratitude is so important, and it's such an important intrinsic part of anyone who's serious about life. If you're able to feel grateful for what you have, then your life is going to manifest itself in ways beyond your wildest dreams. For people that are struggling to be grateful for whatever's going on in their life, they're going to attract negativity. It's like at the beginning when I met those guys with laser beams coming out of their eyes. Those are the guys I wanted to hang out with. I didn't want to hang out with the guys with their heads down. Absolutely. Be a person of gratitude, and look, this right. Smiling is contagious. Just smile more. Smile at people. When I'm running on the beach, I smile at people who I cross paths with. I don't have to speak to them. I just have to smile, give them a thumbs up, give them a yay, and just be positive about things.
Absolutely. Well, I think that's a really lovely place to end our interview here today, Ian. So just give more and smile for and be grateful. So I'm really grateful to you for taking your time out and speaking to us today. And thanks a lot.
Thank you so much for having me, Madeleine. It's been lovely.
Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeleine Black, playing now on all the main platforms, including Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Stitcher for Android, Google Podcasts, Amazon Music, iHeartRadio, and here. Play Unbroken, the podcast, with Madeleine Black.